It's ManuS, and welcome back to the next part of the MTG Arena set review for Ravnica Allegiance. Today we're going to talk about the second part of the black cards. Before we get started, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications to not miss out on the rest of the series and future content. And now on to the black cards. Okay, so first off we have Gutter Bones. This is very clearly a nice constructed card. It's a 2/1 that comes into onto the battlefield tapped, so it only cannot block the first turn, but doesn't have the usual annoying can't block clause like something like the Gravecrawler, for example. It's a bit harder to recure, but basically on Spectacle, or like if you dealt damage to your opponent, you can return Gutter Bones to play. Or rather it says your opponent lost life this turn, so any form of life loss works here. But yeah, it's basically similar to Spectacle in a way here to go along with the rest of the Rakdos theme. A bit surprised that the card doesn't have the Rakdos watermark, because it seems like such a clear Rakdos card. But yeah, in Limited, this is still fine, but probably mostly in more aggressive decks. Otherwise it seems a bit low impact and a bit harder to take advantage of, in my opinion. In Modern, however, this is probably outclassed by other things. Next we have Ill-Gotten Inheritance, an enchantment for mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, Ill-Gotten Inheritance deals 1 damage to each opponent and you gain 1 life, so nothing too impressive here. And for 6 mana you can sack it and drain the opponent for 4. So yeah, clearly not a constructed card, and even in Limited this seems kind of underwhelming. It's pretty expensive for not impacting the board and taking a turn to even have an effect, and then the effect being so small. And yeah, I don't know if this ends up playable. Like, sure, it's a Spectacle enabler without attacking and everything, but even in Limited this seems kind of bad to me. Next we have Noxious Grudion, another 3 mana 2/2 Death Touch, this time a bit easier to cast than the Gorgon in Guilds of Ravnica, but yeah, about the same power level, I would say. A bit better because it's easier to support and probably goes better into Orzhov than into Rakdos in Limited, would be my guess. Next we have Orzhov Enforcer. It's a 2 mana 1/2 Death Touch with Afterlife 1. So in Limited this seems like an amazing card, really good. Trades with the best ground guy of your opponent effectively, and then gives you a 1/1 flyer to start pressuring back, which is great. So yeah, a really good Limited 2-drop. Might even be barely good enough to make it in Constructed, but probably a bit too weak after all. But wouldn't completely count it out, so keep it in the back of your head when brewing decks basically. Only in Standard though. Next we have Orzhov Racketeers. It's 5 mana 3/2. When they deal combat damage to a player, that player discards a card. So yeah, a 3/2 for 5 with no evasion. It's gonna have a hard time to deal damage to the opponent, so this clause is not gonna come up a whole lot. The fact that it has Afterlife 2 is pretty nice. Afterlife 2 is pretty strong, getting 2 1/1 flyers, but the card's still pretty expensive, so it doesn't seem that great, even though Afterlife 2 is nice. So even in Limited, I doubt this is going to be particularly good. Next we have Pestilent Spirit. It's a 3 mana 3/2 ManuS Death Touch. That alone already is pretty good because the opponent has to block with 2 creatures. They're both going to die to the Death Touch, so it basically 4 straights 2 for 1 if the opponent doesn't have removal for it. And instant and sorcery spells you control have Death Touch. This could even be a very decent card in Standard, like imagine Rakdos, for example, with cards like Shock, Lightning Strike, Mortal Coil, that sort of stuff. There's a bunch of good damage dealing cards in Standard that this could synergize with. There's quite a bunch of competition in the 3-drop slot in Standard, but this is definitely a powerful option and something to keep in mind. And in Limited, of course, this is amazing. Like the 3 mana 3/2 ManuS Death Touch alone is great, and then the ability randomly coming up, turning low impact spells into hard removal is amazing. So yeah, premium card in limited. Next we have Blake White, basically the black version of the I think Honorary Goblin was the name in Guilds of Ravnica, but a better version basically, since instead of dealing 1 damage, here the creatures blocking it get -1/-1 until end of turn, making it even harder for them to take down Blake White. So this is even better against like 1/3s where Honorary Goblin would trade. This just beats 2 mana 1/3s, which is a nice bonus, and also might end up doing better against some other stuff. Like against the tokens it doesn't really matter, but against say 1/2s and stuff like that it doesn't trade. So there's a Honorary Goblin already was pretty solid, and this is even better. So really nice 2-drop in limited, but not a constructed card, clearly. Then we have Priest of Forgotten Gods. It's a 2 mana 1/2. You can tap this and sacrifice 2 other creatures. Any number of target players each lose 2 life and sacrifice a creature. You add 2 black mana and draw a card. So effectively you get to turn 2 creatures, trade 2 creatures for a card and an opposing creature, like their worst creature basically. And so yeah, to rephrase, you get to trade your 2 worst creatures against their worst creature and a card, and in the process you also happen to get 2 life and 2 black mana for the cost of tapping your Priest of Forgotten Gods. All in all, pretty solid deal, especially in limited. This seems pretty nice with all the Afterlife synergies stuff providing fodder for this. And even in constructed, this could be somehow interesting, but not that likely. It's pretty fragile and it takes a turn to get online and sets you back on board, so I'm not sure if there's any implications in constructed, but in limited it seems really strong and needs to be dealt with quickly. Next we have Rakdos Trumpeter. It's a 2 mana 1/3 ManuS that you can pump for Rakdos mana. So basically the Rakdos card, like the black card with the Rakdos activation. Trumpeter gets +2/+0 for 4 mana. So nothing too exciting, but I mean, it is a 2-drop, a 1/3 for 2 is decent, especially on defense, and even on offense thanks to ManuS and the pump ability it can turn into a threat later. Nothing great, but seems like a decent curve filler, at least in limited. Next we have Spawn of Mayhem. This card is clearly a constructed staple. The 4 mana 4/4 flying trample. At the beginning of your upkeep, Spawn of Mayhem deals 1 damage to each player, and if you have 10 or less life, you put a counter on Spawn of Mayhem. Also it has Spectacle, so most of the time in constructed it will be a 3 mana 4/4 flying trample, which is really, really good. So this is another premium 3-drop in constructed in Rakdos and probably also other black base decks. The more aggressive you are, the better this card gets, and this is definitely quite a monster in standard. In limited, this is obviously a bomb, so yeah, snap pick. Next we have Spire Mangler. It's a 3 mana 2/1 flying with flash, and when it enters the battlefield, target creature with flying you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So either you can flash this in and make it a 4/1 and trade up with a bigger flyer, or you can just deal some extra damage with another flyer. Works particularly well with Afterlife tokens, or just make an Afterlife token a 3/1 and trade with something bigger. Stuff like that. And even like a 3 mana 2/1 flying with flash alone is already a decent card in a lot of limited formats. In this format it's a bit worse, I guess, because there's a whole bunch of Afterlife tokens making one toughness flyers significantly worse, because they often are being stalled out or trading with random tokens. Next we have Thirsting Shade. It's a 1 mana 1/1 lifelink. For 3 mana you give it you can pump it for +1/+1, the typical Shade stuff. Yeah, not that great. The pump ability being so expensive is very restrictive. The lifelink doesn't really make up for it, and the base body being a 1/1 is very weak, so you need a lot of pumping to make this matter, so I don't think even in limited this is gonna be worth it. Next we have Undercity Scavenger, another hill giant with bonus. That's how far hill giants have come these days. The 4 mana 3/3, when Undercity Scavenger enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, put 2+1/+1 counters on it and scry 2. So another nice synergy with Afterlife, either with Afterlife creatures you don't need anymore and rather want the flying tokens, or just eating a token to drop a 4 mana 5/5 scry 2, which is actually really powerful. So if you have something to spare to eat with this, this is a really powerful 4-drop. This seems like a really strong common in limited. Next we have Undercity's Embrace. Target opponent sacrifices a creature, and if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you gain 4 life. So an Edict in Standard, I don't think there is any good edicts right now. Getting a decent Edict gives black control decks more options against cards like Tyrant. So Grixis and Esper control shells get some nice additional options with this, even though the second clause is usually not active there. And in limited, this is probably pretty terrible given all the Afterlife. Next we have Vindictive Vampire. Whenever another creature you control dies, Vindictive Vampire deals 1 damage to the opponent and you gain 1 life. It's a 4 mana 2/3, so pretty small and no evasion, making this a bit better than an enchantment, but not a whole lot. So not sure how well this is gonna play in limited. My guess would be it's at least not great, but probably fine. And last but not least, we have the Haunt of High Tower, another mythic rare bomb in limited, probably too weak for constructed. It's a 3/3 flying lifelink. When it attacks, defending player discards a card, and whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, the Haunt of High Tower gets a +1/+1 counter on it. So usually when this attacks and the opponent still has cards in hand, it's at least a 4/4 flying lifelink on the first attack, and you can easily slam this down before combat, then attack, force the opponent to either take a lot of damage or trade and grow your Haunt of High Tower. And yeah, this is an absolute limited monster that if the opponent can't deal with it right away, will just run away with the game really quickly. But 6 mana is also not that cheap. So there are formats where this would not end up that great because it's a bit too slow and too easily answered when it comes down. But this format so far looks like it shouldn't be that fast that this isn't good, so seems like an easy limited first pick. Okay, this concludes part 2 of the black cards. Hope you guys are enjoying the series so far. Let me know in the comments what you think. Also hit the like button, share it with your friends to help support the content. That would really be nice. If you want to further support the content, consider whitelisting YouTube on your ad block. That also really helps. And yeah, check the description for more info on social media, live stream and stuff like that. And I'll be back tomorrow with the first part of the red cards. Thanks for watching everyone. See you tomorrow. Bye.